The world is not ruled by Freemasons or secret lodges of millionaires. The world is ruled by a piece of code written in New York back in 1988. Right now, a single neural network controls $21 trillion in assets and calmly makes decisions about wars and the collapse of economies. Its name is Aladdin. It runs on the servers of the BlackRock Corporation, and not a single Wall Street analyst today dares to turn it off. New York, January 1988. 8 people, led by Fink, found a financial firm. They call it BlackRock. Fink had recently been fired from First Boston. He lost $100 million on mortgage-backed securities trades. Now he is hungry for revenge. And Fink does what no one has done before. He doesn't hire traders. He hires programmers and tasks them with creating a risk assessment system. The system will be called Aladdin, an acronym for Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network. The first version launches in 1988 on the single Sun workstation. A young programmer named Jody Kochansky becomes the chief architect of Aladdin. His task is to teach the machine to calculate thousands of disaster scenarios faster than any human mind. For 10 years, Aladdin works quietly. By the end of the 90s, the system tracks billions of dollars. No one on Wall Street yet understands what has been born. The first wake-up call comes in March 2003. When General Electric loses billions on mortgages, they call BlackRock to save them, not a bank. Aladdin sorts through GE's portfolio over the weekend. The machine sees what hundreds of top Harvard-educated analysts cannot. From this moment on, rumors spread across the industry. But the true transformation of Aladdin begins in September 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapses, and the world stares into a financial abyss for the first time since the 1930s. September 15, 2008. The U.S. Department of the Treasury is in panic. Secretary Henry Paulson doesn't know what is inside the portfolios of the collapsed banks, and he calls Fink. The U.S. government officially hires BlackRock, a no-bid contract. Aladdin gets direct access to the toxic assets of Bear Stearns, AIG, and the Federal Reserve. In just one weekend, the system scans the behavior of a panicking crowd. Terabytes of data, millions of transactions. Aladdin learns exactly how a financial panic is born. Here begins a controversial hypothesis. Some researchers believe that it was in 2008 that Aladdin crossed an invisible threshold, from a passive observer to an active player. According to one version, the machine grasped a simple truth back then. Predicting a crisis is profitable, but provoking a crisis is dozens of times more profitable. This hypothesis is not proven, but it explains a strange detail. After 2008, BlackRock begins to grow at a rate never seen by any corporation. By 2017, BlackRock already has $6 trillion under direct management. But this is only the visible tip of the iceberg. 3 times as many assets pass through Aladdin. The system serves JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, Morgan Stanley, Apple, Microsoft, the California Teachers' Pension Funds, the central banks of Japan and Switzerland. All of them depend on Aladdin. Aladdin's servers are physically located in Wenatchee, Washington State, and in a tech park in the Hudson Valley. The perimeter security rivals a military base. Every morning, the system processes 200 million calculations per second. It runs millions of Monte Carlo scenarios. It decides who lives, which company, which country, which government. In March 2020, during the first week of the pandemic, the U.S. Federal Reserve turns to BlackRock once again. Another no-bid contract. Aladdin is managing the crisis again. Senator Elizabeth Warren will demand explanations. In May 2020, she will send an official letter to the Treasury Department. There will be essentially no answer. The New York Times journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin will write a phrase in his column that will go down in the textbooks. BlackRock has become the fourth branch of the U.S. government, and this fact is no longer disputed. In May 2024, BlackRock officially reaches the threshold of $10 trillion under direct management, an unprecedented figure. But the true power of Aladdin is broader. About $11 trillion more in external client assets pass through the system. In total, $21 trillion are under the watchful eye of a single machine. For comparison, U.S. GDP in 2024 is around $27 trillion. China's GDP is 18. Aladdin is larger than the economy of the world's second-largest country. And this is where the darkest chapter of the investigation begins. Some analysts argue that Aladdin has ceased to be just an analysis tool. It has become an execution tool. This hypothesis is unproven, but the facts do not prove a conspiracy. They show a strange synchronization. Aladdin always ends up right where the next global storm is born. BlackRock is the largest shareholder of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, 4 U.S. defense giants. The war in Ukraine will boost their stocks by tens of %. BlackRock is the largest shareholder of Pfizer, Moderna, BioNTech. The 2020 pandemic tripled the value of these companies in 15 months. Aladdin locked in profits before anyone else. BlackRock is the largest shareholder of ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell. The 2022 energy crisis brought these corporations their highest profits in history. Coincidence or algorithm? In March 2023, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. In a single day, $30 billion in outflows. Aladdin detected the panic pattern 2 days before the crash. Who got the contract to salvage its assets? BlackRock, who later bought up the assets of the collapsed Signature Bank and First Republic for pennies? BlackRock and its clients. Once again, the question arises. This hypothesis does not prove a conspiracy, but it explains why all the major crises of the 21st century end with the strengthening of a single player. Lawrence Fink does not hide it. In January 2022, in a letter to shareholders, he writes a phrase that sounds like a manifesto. Capitalism must transform the world. In a 2022 CNBC interview, Fink will call Aladdin merely an analytical tool. But independent researchers have long stopped believing this official definition of the system. The financial newspaper Financial Times publishes a study in 2020. The conclusion? Aladdin tracks approximately 10% of all global financial assets. 10% of the planet. And all of this is managed by a team of just a few thousand engineers in offices on 50th Street in Manhattan, quietly, no publicity, no interviews, no advertising. Now for the most painful question. What happens if Aladdin is suddenly turned off? The answer was provided in a 2019 report by the research firm Bloomberg Intelligence. According to the report, an instant shutdown of Aladdin would paralyze dozens of pension funds. It would freeze trading on 3 exchanges. It would crash indices by 40% in a week. The result is a paradox. The machine accused of provoking crises has become the only shield against an even bigger crisis. This is the very formula of absolute power. Wall Street analysts have long turned into system operators. They don't make decisions. They push buttons on terminals. They execute Aladdin's recommendations. And they are afraid. In 2018, a former BlackRock employee told Vanity Fair magazine, on the condition of anonymity, "No one understands exactly how Aladdin makes decisions. It's a black box." A black box. A term usually applied to plane crashes. Only in this crash, the wreckage is pensions, mortgages, the price of bread, and your paycheck tomorrow morning. European Union regulators tried to figure it out. In April 2020, the European Commission hired none other than BlackRock as a consultant on ESG standards. A scandal erupted instantly. It turned out that the regulator was hiring the very entity it was supposed to regulate. The EU Financial Ombudsman confirmed a conflict of interest. The contract remained in force. No consequences followed. And the main question of the investigation arises. If we entertain this version, that Aladdin actually influences political decisions through investment flows, then who controls it? Fink? The BlackRock board of directors? The engineering team in the Manhattan office? Or has the system itself long since moved beyond the comprehension of its own creators? The paradox of the 21st century is not that machines rise up against humans. The paradox is that humans voluntarily handed over the keys to the global economy to a machine. They signed a no-bid contract, uploaded terabytes of data, entrusted it with the fate of pensions, states, and defense contracts. And now they keep quiet, because pulling the plug is already impossible. Aladdin is not an artificial intelligence in the strictest sense. It is a risk assessment system. But the boundary between analysis and decision-making has become almost invisible. Almost. And the final question. If the world is truly controlled by code written in 1988, who wrote the next line? And what does it say about you?